It's amazing how many people don't know about this. And look, to be fair, I didn't know about this until about 5 years ago, until someone pointed it out to me. And I sort of knew about it, but I didn't really think about it in a lot of depth because I didn't think it caused a lot of trouble. What I'm going to show you is basically, this is inbuilt into the Shimano system and both of the 3-bolt systems, but it's a bit easier to see with the Shimano one. When you're using particularly a yellow tipped cleat like we've got here, which has got some float on it, right? You will get this, which is what we want. That's the float, right? Yep. Now, because of the design of the sort of roughly triangular shape, I guess, of the system, when you have rotatory ability available in this cleat system, you also have, and I don't know how well this is going to show up, you also have lateral float. Right. So the pedal the shoe can move sideways.
So is that changing the Q factor?
This is a dynamic Q factor alteration which can occur anytime you pedal, which means potentially if your foot is kind of pushing slightly sideways on the pedal one way or the other, across the course of every pedal stroke, the pedal body can move sideways.
Is that going to happen mainly at force? General zone 2 riding?
It can just move.
Okay.
It can move. Now, where it gets interesting is if the cleat is rotated a bit, or your foot is rotated a bit, obviously, it stops. So if the cleat is like, now I've pulled the pedal body down like this, the lateral movement kind of stops, right? But if your foot is in the middle of the float range, it's got, I don't know, about 5 millimeters. I don't know if that's going to come up on footage.
Decent.
It's a decent amount of float. Now, this is a brand new Shimano Ultegra pedal that I've just pulled out of the box with a brand new cleat. When they get a bit worn, they tend to wear under the lip at the front of the pedal body there. That's where the cleat, kind of squirrels out, it gouges out a bit of the material over time. And also at the back where the tines of this kind of spring-loaded mechanism grab, these little wear points in here, they wear over time, particularly the one at the front. And when they're quite worn, this gets epic and it gets really loose. So at the moment, you can see I'm having to use a bit of force. So probably like, I don't know, a kilogram of force, 2 kilos of force.
Not much considering it's your hand.
Yeah,
versus your whole
it's not
leg.
like I'm forcing it, right?
Yeah.
But when they get quite worn, if you've got quite an old pedal body, this is just like, and it's twice as much as this.
So what?
So what? So what this means is that your Q factor may not be what you think your Q factor is, depending upon which cleat you're using.
Just for those people who don't know Q factor.
Q factor is how far apart your feet are.
Yeah.
Now, in bike positioning terms, this is really quite critical sometimes for people. Especially, so I had a lady in my clinic a couple of weeks ago she had some really, really heavily worn old 105 or Ultegra pedals, and she was internally rotating her feet really severely. I said, "Oh, you weren't doing that a year ago when I saw you." And we pulled them off, and this thing was just like, that's moving like 10 millimeters sideways. Stick on some new pedals and she's much squarer. So as her Q factor dynamically changed, she rotated her toes inwards to try and subconsciously bring her feet closer together because they were basically slipping sideways and moving too far out. Now, a lot of people kind of run their pedals to the end of time and they don't realize that this is happening as they wear. It happens even when they're brand new, but it's a lot worse when they're worn, okay? The question you should probably ask yourself is this a problem for an average person? The answer is patently no. This is not a problem for a lot of people because otherwise there'd be heaps of people out there riding Shimano pedals with massive knee pain because of the Q factor varying with every pedal stroke. Their foot's moving sideways with every pedal stroke. So this doesn't cause as much trouble as you'd think, but it's definitely something to consider when you're purchasing these. Speed plays have none of this. There's no sideways movement. Look, the system is, I think it's a little bit less lateral float than this, but it's still there, right? So Speed Play is really the only well-known road system that doesn't have this. Both of the 3-bolt designs, the big ones, Look and Shimano, both of them have lateral slip available in the cleat. And it's fascinating that like no one knows this exists. And this is when they're brand new. So you wear these out for a while, or you've got a slightly worn pair of cleats, or the front of that lip is starting to get gouged out a bit, and it gets really big.
Right.
And the person's foot can squirrel sideways on the pedal with every pedal stroke. Yeah. So it's an interesting sort of design feature, flaw, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And it's coupled, obviously, with that float. So if you go to the less floaty cleats, the reds, the blacks, the blues, these things will do this less. Yep. And the completely fixed ones with no float, they don't do it at all. But they have the downside of having no rotational float. So you're stealing from one thing to give to the other, and you can't have the best of both worlds in any of the systems, which is where you have some rotational float but no lateral float.
Yep.
That's what I would love if there was a system that could do that.
Yeah.
And they're called Speedplay, mate.
Yes.
The only ones. So there you go. An interesting thing about Shimano, or look, cleats that you don't really hear about.
Yeah. But you don't hear about it because people aren't experiencing much of an issue, but are they?
Maybe. Yeah. It's I've often asked myself that.
Yeah. And how would they know? Like if you were watching this at home and you're thinking, oh, actually maybe I've noticed some issues. Well, what could they look for?
The big one would be that as your pedal body gets quite old, just clip your shoes in, flip the shoe upside down. If it's moving a lot and you find that you're like internally rotating your feet or like riding really heel in, and then you buy a new pair of pedals and it's suddenly way better, you've got a problem with this.
Okay.
Yeah. So it gets murky because if you accidentally rotate one of the cleats a little bit when you install it, one of the shoes may have no lateral float and the other one has 5 millimeters. So you get a symmetry issue potentially from this. So yeah, it's an interesting...
That is interesting. Yeah.
It's just
You've got my attention with that one, Neil.
The lateral movement is always coupled with the rotatory movement due to the design of the system. Yeah. So look, Speedplays also have their flaws, don't get me wrong, but this, I believe this is one of the flaws of the 3-bolt pedal systems. Yeah. So there you go.
Cool.
Something to consider.